If you can't learn how to play by the rules, these things are just gonna keep happening. How's it going, everybody? My name is Eric, and welcome to Out of the Groove, the NASCAR show for NASCAR people like you and me. If you're not a NASCAR person, I hate to say you're probably in the wrong place. You might want to take the next exit and U-turn, but for the rest of you, we've got a lot to talk about today. So I don't want to waste any of your time. Let's jump right into it. The biggest story we have to talk about today is one I alluded to on Monday's episode when photos came out of both Chase Elliott and Jamie McMurray with kind of bowed windshields and rear windshields on their cars from this last weekend's race at Texas. I told you then that I was 80 to 90% sure that we would see some penalties this week, and sure enough, we did. Wednesday morning, it was announced that Chase Elliott's team had been docked 20 points. Alan Gustafson, the crew chief, has been suspended for 2 races and was fined 50,000 smackaroons. Which, if you compare this to Kevin Harvick's similar infraction from earlier this season at Las Vegas, they're fairly similar. Harvick's was a little bit worse. Part of that is because he won the race, and part of that was because I believe Harvick also actually had a small other, like, side skirt infraction in that incident. So Chase Elliott's penalty pretty much on par with Harvick's. So there you go, NASCAR, you're being consistent. However, this penalty definitely hurts for Chase Elliott. This is the second significant penalty this team has had this season. They're now 18th in points. I mentioned this a few weeks ago when they had a penalty for a rear suspension violation. Chase Elliott, keep in mind, guys, I know we always talk about, we assume he's a shoo-in for the playoffs, we assume he's going to win a race, but keep in mind, he still has never won a Cup Series race. And while most of us expect him to get a win at some point this season, we kind of got to assume that they might be trying to point their way into the playoffs at this point, and with all these penalties, now they're 18th in points, and they've kind of had up and down results this season, and Kendrick Motorsports isn't what they used to be. With all of these factors, yeah, we might start having to worry a little bit about that 9 car. I definitely think they have the speed and the talent to make the playoffs. We see that, obviously, but they keep shooting themselves in the foot with things like this. And at some point, they're just going to have to shore that up, or, you know, maybe they just won't. They'll miss out this year, which, with the way NASCAR's got their playoffs, 16 cars get in. If you miss the playoffs, you can't. That's a rough season. My reaction to this penalty is I think it was fair by NASCAR to be consistent. I thought it was interesting. Hendrick Motorsports, in their statement, they're not appealing this penalty. Kenny Francis, I believe, will be filling in as the crew chief these next 2 weeks. They're not appealing this penalty, and the way they phrased it was that they are aware that they had an unintentional rear windshield brace malfunction. That's the exact same thing that happened to Harvick a few weeks ago, but what's interesting is Hendrick Motorsports threw out the word unintentional, as if to say they did not plan for this to break, they did not plan for there to be a dip to give them extra downforce on the rear spoiler. They didn't plan for that, but it was unintentional. Interestingly, Rodney Childers, I saw Kevin Harvick's crew chief, mentioned on Twitter that just these days, with the amount of speed and power that these cars are carrying into the corners on these fast racetracks, there's a lot of extra weight back there, and that Childers actually said that before this weekend's race at Texas, they actually replaced their braces with a little bit heavier braces to ensure they wouldn't break. So I thought that was an interesting detail, that this is an area on the car that we haven't really had to worry about before, but it's become an issue this season for a couple of drivers. And it's interesting that it seems like this isn't necessarily a 100% planned issue that these teams are having. We've seen in the past where teams and crew chiefs and drivers will intentionally plan for parts to kind of break or move around during the race. It's hard to tell if that's what this issue is. NASCAR and NASCAR engineers and team engineers probably know more. Obviously, Rodney Childers or Alan Gustafson know for sure whether or not it was intentional or not, but we'll never probably get that answer from them. But I thought the penalty was fair. I hope that these teams can get a handle on it the way Rodney Childers seems to have, at least, or at least he understands it. I hope these teams start to do that so we don't have to have these conversations anymore. I feel like a parent putting his child in timeout, making sure he knows what he did wrong and then he doesn't do it again. But anyway, so that was a big piece of news that came out this week. It's also worth noting, I've talked about on Monday, this image of Jamie McMurray's car, who finished 3rd in the race at Texas. His front windshield appears in this image and in a couple other images appears to be dipping slightly on the driver's side there. You can see in that image. But McMurray seems to have escaped without any penalty. I could not find an official statement from NASCAR on that incident specifically. There's rumors that this image could be photoshopped. There's rumors that perhaps this is something that's less common. There wasn't actually a piece breaking and it was just either the photos playing with our eyes or the fact that perhaps this kind of dip in the front windshield doesn't necessarily give the car any aero advantage the way the one on the rear windshield did, which I don't know who to believe. I'm kind of surprised they didn't at least mention this, or that there wasn't anything talked about here that makes me think maybe it was a non-issue. I heard on Monday that NASCAR had seen this and were looking at Jamie McMurray, so they seemed to determine that there was no issue. So I think that is worth noting, because we'll see if teams now down the road start doing this. Maybe this becomes a trend, because maybe there is an advantage there that NASCAR is unaware of, but teams are aware of. maybe that becomes an issue and NASCAR has to address it later this season. I hope not. I hope we don't have to worry about silly little trivial things like that. But anyway, thought that was worth noting. Moving on, there's been some hot rumors cooking in the oven the last couple days. I'm not sure where it all started, but I've seen it discussed even by some, reputable NASCAR reporters that there are some potential changes coming to the All-Star race this season. And I know you guys are thinking, that's not surprising, they change the All-Star race every freaking year. And while that is true, this change could be quite interesting. The rumor going around is that NASCAR is going to be using restrictor plates for the Cup race, All-Star race at Charlotte in a few weeks. Restrictor plates at a 1.5-mile track. We're used to seeing restrictor plates at Daytona and Talladega, the big super speedway tracks with drafting and pack racing and all that type of stuff. We're not used to seeing this at 1.5-mile tracks. This is an interesting development to say the least, because really we don't know exactly what effect this will have on the actual on-track product. Some people have voiced concerns that perhaps the cars will just be going too fast and the track itself won't be able to hold the amount of speed that these cars are capable of producing. Because the reason we have restrictor plates at Daytona and Talladega is because those tracks are so big, so high banked, that these cars can run 220, they could realistically probably run 220, 230 through the corners without sliding up into the wall. Obviously those engines wouldn't allow it, but the engines could get up to maybe 210, and with these restrictor plates we see them tap out or usually max out at around 200. But the difference is, at a track like Charlotte with much less banking and whatnot in the corners, the max speed these cars can realistically carry is maybe in the 170s to 180s, which means we're still going to see drivers lifting a little bit here and there on the entry into corners, which we don't see at Talladega and Daytona. And so because the odds of us seeing 2-3 wide pack racing like at Daytona and Talladega is just not realistic. But we'll definitely see some drafting, particularly on the straightaways and particularly maybe up front. It's definitely going to be harder for the leader to get out and gap the field the way he can typically at a track like Charlotte. Drafting will come into play. The cars will probably be closer together for the most part, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be easier to pass. But I don't really know that much about the specifics of this aero package. I just know we're going to be talking a lot about aerodynamics during the All-Star race, which, since it's an exhibition race that nobody really cares about the result of, I guess it's all fun and games and fine, but it's not, it's something that isn't always the most fun to talk about. We're going to hear a lot about air, a lot about drafting, a lot about, positioning and stuff like that. It'll be interesting if this actually becomes true. Because like I said, this is just a rumor. We do not have any confirmation from NASCAR or anybody, at least as far as it's Wednesday afternoon. No confirmation yet that this is what's happening, but it's been a hot rumor that's been discussed widely throughout many people in the NASCAR community. So let me know what you guys think about that, because I think this could be interesting. I'm glad that at least they're testing things in the All-Star race. I wish they would test things that maybe we might see in the actual real racing series throughout the next few months, but at least they're trying something new. I'll give them credit for that. There was some other news that came out this week. I talked about it briefly on Twitter. It came out a couple days ago, so I'm a little behind talking about it, but Monster Energy, who sponsored the NASCAR Cup Series last season and now this season, officially renewed their partnership with NASCAR through the end of 2019. So that's right, we still have about 1.5 years or so of the Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series. This comes after months of negotiation with NASCAR. Monster Energy already is not paying nearly as much as Sprint/Nextel did for the 10 or 12, 15 years, however long they sponsored the Cup Series. They're not paying nearly as much, but these negotiations have been have been ongoing for quite a while now, so it's nice to see at least something be announced and confirmed. However, before we get too excited about NASCAR holding on to a main sponsor, which is great, don't get me wrong, it's really great, it's worth noting that this is just a 1-year extension. And remember, we had the Winston sponsored the Cup Series for like 30 years. Obviously Sprint/Nextel sponsored for 14 or so years. So by comparison, this isn't a big deal or anything, but it's nice. Articles and discussions that I've read and seen talk about how NASCAR is kind of going after a different model of sponsorship, I guess, for 2020. There's discussions that they could kind of follow the route the NFL or MLB or NBA or even some other leagues across the world have kind of followed, where instead of having a title sponsor of the series, like the Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series, they would just call it the NASCAR Cup Series, or they actually threw out some other names that have been tossed around. And instead, sponsors like Monster Energy would be known as Monster Energy, the official energy drink of NASCAR, and they would be one of the top promoted brands week to week in the NASCAR world. I'm really bad at explaining things. But anyway, much how we have the NFL, where they have like the official truck of the NFL, the official pizza of the NFL, the official plumber of the NFL. I don't know. They have all sorts of things. We would see a lot more of that in NASCAR. We already have Busch now is the official beer of NASCAR. We have things like that already, but now we'd probably just see a lot more, and they would be much more talked about. I'm sure from a dollars and cents point of view, this makes more sense for NASCAR. Maybe they see a chance for more money. They're having a hard time holding on to making long, major deals with sponsors, which isn't super surprising. So I think this makes a lot more sense to instead of trying to get one company to invest a ton of money, kind of make it more of a group effort where people buy part of the NASCAR brand. At least that's the rumor being discussed. That's the way people seem to be talking about it, and that's possibly very likely for 2020. But we'll have Monster Energy through this season and next season, so fun. The last big thing I wanted to hit on today is, I mentioned it again on Monday, I want to follow it up. Daniel Suarez was injured during last week's race at Texas Motor Speedway. On the second lap in that wreck, he injured his hand, thumb area, and actually managed to finish the race impressively despite this injury and despite having a very damaged race car. He came out after the race and showed that he had a big cast all over his hand, wrist area, and left a lot of fans speculating whether he was going to be okay to race at Bristol. He visited a doctor, and according to Daniel Suarez himself, he is good to go for Bristol this weekend. So we can put all of our rumors and conspiracies that Edwards or Kenseth are coming back, or that we'll have a young driver in that car next week. Nope, Daniel Suarez will be in the 19 for Bristol. I think he said he's going to wear a brace on his thumb, wrist area, but that's also it'll be impressive to see. That's a tough track. That's a physical track. I mean, that's 500 laps, a lot of turning, a lot of fighting the car. Man, I'll be impressed with Suarez if he can do well at all this weekend. But anyway, I just wanted to follow up with that right there. So that is my show for today, midweek episode of Out of the Groove. I'm hoping to do another episode on Friday where I will preview Bristol, give you my picks. The weather not looking too great for Bristol right now, but I hope that clears up because Bristol, always one of my favorite racetracks. Even with the new reconfiguration and everything, I still love it. So hopefully that comes out good. Join the discussion, leave comments down below, follow me on Twitter, tweet at me at Dex Racing. Links are in the description for all of that stuff. There's a podcast that I do each week with Danny B Talks and the Iceberg this week. Actually tonight, if you're watching this on Wednesday, tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern time on the Iceberg's channel. I'll put a link down below, or you can look around for it. We talk NASCAR, we take fan questions, we interact with fans, we do all that stuff, so you can join us live for that. Of course, I do my live streams once or twice a week. Friday night typically is when I stream NASCAR video games. If you want to get on there and talk about racing with me, I typically do that on Friday evenings, and this week should not be any exception. But yeah, other than that, thanks for checking it out. Thanks for watching, everybody. Got some interesting announcements perhaps coming up pretty soon with some other things on this channel that a lot of you guys hopefully will be somewhat interested in. So keep an eye out for those. But that's all I'm going to say on that for now. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you again just later this week, or tonight if you watch the live podcast. So have a good one, everybody.